In this video, we'll go over the best kinds of effects that Yu-Gi-Oh cards can have, and rank them in orders of which are the best of the best, even if there isn't actually a good card which has some of these really good effects. And at number 10, we have the effect of drawing cards. Drawing cards in Yu-Gi-Oh is a lot more valuable than in other card games, because Yu-Gi-Oh does not have a resource system. In things like Magic, Pokemon, or Hearthstone, you have to pay a resource in order to use your cards, and sometimes some of your cards are part of the resource you need to pay. So in those games, drawing cards is a trade-off of having to both get rid of a card from your hand and give up some of your resources of that game while being able to do less things during your turn. In Yu-Gi-Oh, none of that applies. You don't do anything other than pay the cost the card literally has printed on its card text. If you had a deck of nothing but Pot of Greed that lets you draw 2 cards for no cost, you could just draw through your entire deck in one turn. And this little niche of Yu-Gi-Oh is why drawing cards is so much harder to do. A card like Pot of Desires, which lets you draw 2 cards at the cost of getting rid of a fourth of your deck, is considered really good because drawing 2 cards is just that valuable in this game. It allows you to go +1 in card advantage, and card advantage matters a lot more in a game where card advantage is everything, since you can play every card in your deck in one turn if you're able to draw into it. So pretty much every card which allows you to draw effortlessly is banned, and all the ones that aren't banned have incredible restrictions and downsides to them, like banishing a fourth of your deck. And at number 9, we have Quick Effect Monster Destruction. So this one is kind of specific. Being able to destroy monsters is good. Being able to destroy all of your opponent's monsters is even better. But being able to destroy your opponent's monsters during your opponent's turn on a quick effect from a monster is even better. It might be weird to think that destroying one monster during your opponent's turn is better than destroying all of them during your turn, but it is. That's why cards like Dark Hole, which can destroy all of your opponent's monsters, is currently unlimited, whereas cards like Zodiac Trident, which can destroy one monster during your opponent's turn, is banned. The thing with Quick Effect Destruction is that it allows you to disrupt your opponent's strategy. It's more than just destroying that card, as if your opponent is setting up a combo, and you know what that combo is, you can destroy a key combo piece before they get a chance to use it. Or if your opponent is using something that will counter you, you can get rid of it before it has a chance to counter you, like destroying a brand new Eater of Millions before it gets a chance to destroy one of your destruction immune cards. Now, destroying your opponent's spell and trap cards is also good during your opponent's turn. However, modern Yu-Gi-Oh is very much about monster effects, so being able to get rid of monsters before they can use their monster effects, or be used to build into stronger monsters, is more valuable than destroying one of your opponent's spell or trap cards during their turn, since you can't really prevent them from doing combos with spell or trap card removal in the same way that you can prevent your opponent from doing combos by destroying monsters. So having a quick effect destruction of any card is good as well, because it gives you the option to destroy spell or traps as well, but it's really the ability to destroy monsters specifically that's the better effect, and why it makes this list, but only at the number 9 spot. And at number 8, we have Graveyard Effects, or the effect of gaining advantage from the graveyard. Now, there are a handful of cards in the game which have effects that can be activated directly from the graveyard, usually in response to something happening, like how you're able to set Lost Winds after your opponent special summons a monster from their extra deck. But some of them can be activated whenever you want, during opportunities in which you can use Spell Speed 1 effects, so generally during your main phase. And then there's graveyard effects that can be used whenever you want during both players' turns, like ORCUST cards when their field spell card is out, or certain trap graveyard effects, as most trap cards have a Spell Speed 2 effect if they're usable from the graveyard. Now, the reason graveyard effects are so valuable is for a whole bunch of reasons. First, it's much easier to send cards from your deck to the graveyard than it is to add them to your hand. Second, if you do have the card in your hand, you can send it to the graveyard to activate the cost of another effect, and then still gain their effects anyway from the graveyard. So it turns a lot of cards which have strong downsides into benefits, as you still get to gain advantage from those resources used. And also it lets you use a card that was once on the field again, as if you normal summon an ORCUST monster, for example, and then use it to go into a combo piece. You can then use it again from the graveyard to get another combo piece on the board. So if you do use the card on the field, you can use it again later. Or if your opponent has some kind of strategy where they try to get rid of your hand, it doesn't matter as you can still do your plays from the graveyard. Modern graveyard effects are basically like having a second hand, and gaining free advantage from the graveyard is super good, and why pretty much any kind of card which has a good graveyard effect sees competitive play. And at number 7, we have the Omni Negate. This is the ability to negate anything your opponent has, and is one of the best effects in the game because, if used at the right time, can completely disrupt your opponent's entire turn. If your opponent is going for a long combo chain in order to make an unbreakable board, there is always one point in that combo where if you negate one of the effects, it stops them dead in their tracks, and makes it easier for you to do combos on your turn. Although conversely, if you're going against a deck that has a whole bunch of negates, then you won't be able to do anything, and your opponent can just slowly poke you to death. Or if you have a strong board and only one negate, there is a good chance you can stop whatever your opponent is trying to use to break your board. Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is kind of built around negates. Your deck is considered good if you can get out combo pieces and still have enough room in your deck in order to have a couple of negates. If your deck requires too many combo pieces to do anything and can't play enough negates, it probably won't see competitive play. And at number 6, we have the ability to special summon monsters from your deck. If you have the ability to summon a monster, the best possible place to special summon it from is your deck, as that's the default starting position, and requires no resources in order to get to that target. If you special summon a monster from your hand, you still need to get that target to your hand. Or if you special summon it from your graveyard or the banish zone, you need to get it there first. Whereas you don't need to move a card in your deck anywhere, and you just have tons of cards in your deck at all times, so resource-wise, it's the best possible place to special summon monsters from. And that's why most of the cards that let you special summon from the deck are incredibly strong or banned. Especially if they're graveyard effects that let you special summon from the deck, like ORCUST Harp Horror, which is a card that was banned recently for having 2 of the best effects in the game. I was honestly surprised when I first saw that card printed because the effect was just incredibly good. Currently, we have a card called Destiny Hero Malicious, who can special summon other copies of itself from the deck from the graveyard, and that card is actually super good. I wouldn't be surprised to see it be put back on the semi-limited list in the future, especially since at 3 copies, it allows you to go +2 in card advantage if you're able to get a single one of them into the graveyard. And at number 5, we have the ability to search out spell cards. Generally, spell cards are incredibly difficult to search out, where the only common spell searcher, the left arm offering, requires you to go -2 in card advantage to even use, and it still sees tons of competitive play. The ability to search out spell cards is incredibly rare, and generally only attached to cards which can search out specific cards from their archetype, or have convoluted requirements to searching out any spell card. When it comes to the trio of spell, trap, and monster cards, spells are definitely the hardest ones to search out, and have the least amount of support for searching them out, because they have the potential to be the strongest if they can be searched out. One of the reasons Soul Charge stayed unbanned for so long, despite the fact that it was obviously an incredibly powerful card that could win you the game on its own, was because it was difficult to search out. You basically had to get lucky in order to win with it, since it was limited to 1 copy for most of its lifetime of competitive availability. And it was also why they thought printing a card like That Grass Looks Greener was okay, because it was a generic normal spell card with a powerful effect, just like Soul Charge. But it was impossible to build your deck around it, since it was so difficult to search out, and required you to play a 60-card deck to get the full benefit of it. Although, Left Arm Offering existed, and gave them just enough searchability that people were playing 60-card decks in order to make use of That Grass Looks Greener anyway. And if they were able to pull off a single grass, they could go a potential +20 off of all of the graveyard effects that they just sent there. And because of that potential to gain so much advantage from 1 card, they were happily playing Left Arm Offering, which got rid of their entire hand in order to bring out that 1 card. There are just some spell cards that can give you so much advantage that they can win you the game on their own, and most of the time those cards get banned, or are so niche and hard to search out that no one plays them, which is why this is one of the best effects in the game. And at number 4, we have discarding from your opponent's hand. If you're able to discard every card from your opponent's hand during your first turn, then your opponent doesn't really get a chance to play the game, which can basically win you the game in most cases. unless they're playing a deck that has nothing but graveyard effects. Another reason why graveyard effects are so good. However, most decks only have a handful of cards with graveyard effects, and a lot of them have triggers on how they can be used anyway. So if you find a way to get rid of every card in your opponent's hand before they have a chance to play the game, there's a good chance you're going to win 9 times out of 10. Currently, the only meta deck that can really pull this off successfully and consistently are Trickstar decks, with their Trickstar Reincarnation and DROLL Lockbird combo. But outside of that, usually Konami bans any card which even comes close to allowing you to discard cards from your opponent's hand too easily. Pretty much every single spell or trap card which allows you to discard from your opponent's hand without some kind of insane condition or cost is just straight up banned on the ban list. And any card which allows you to loop an effect to discard your opponent's hand generally gets placed on the ban list immediately, like Wind Up Carriers and Mighty, and Topologic Gumblar Dragon. So, if you can prevent your opponent from playing the game before they get a chance to play the game, you don't have to worry about things like card advantage or Omni Negates, which makes it one of the better effects in the game. And at number 3, we have the ability to cheat monsters out of the extra deck. Now, the best place to special summon monsters from is the deck, but it's even better to special summon a monster from the extra deck, because there's a lot of really good extra deck monsters who are balanced around the fact that you can only bring them out through some resource-intensive combo. So, if you're able to cheat out a card like Hot Red Dragon Archifiend Abyss, you get a strong monster from the field who has a good negate effect, who was made to be strong because he's supposed to be difficult to bring out, as its requirements are a specific type of synchro monster as one of its materials. Now, some extra deck monsters had the foresight to prevent them from being cheated out of the extra deck, so you're kinda limited in which cards you can actually pull out, depending on which effects you're trying to use. If you're using a card like Waking the Dragon, which lets you special summon any monster from your extra deck, generally the best choice is Ultimate Falcon, because of a whole bunch of different factors like which decks you'll be going up against in the meta, and the average time in which the card will be brought out, i.e. usually during your opponent's turn when they destroy this card, although there's even some stuff like NATURIA EXTERIO, which has the effect to negate spell or trap cards pretty easily. There's even cards who have floating effects that activate if they're sent directly from the extra deck to the graveyard, like Elder Entity Natis or Herald of the Arc Light. Even cards which can only cheat out an incredibly specific type of extra deck monster, like Instant Fusion for example, sees tons of competitive play because of how good so many extra deck monsters are. They're not balanced around being able to be brought out easily, they're balanced around being difficult to get out. So being able to cheat out some cards which are intended to be very hard to bring out is what gives this effect so much power, and why out of all of the Guard Dragons, only Guard Dragon Agripane got banned, since it special summons from the extra deck, while the other two could special summon from the deck and graveyard. Special summoning from the deck and graveyard are both really good too, it's just cheating monsters out of the extra deck is better, considering most decks are all about going into a whole bunch of combos for the sole purpose of going into extra deck monsters. If you could just cheat them all out, then that would kind of eliminate the need for most combo decks. And at number 2, we have the ability to activate trap cards from your hand. Now, trap cards are balanced around the fact that they need to be set for a turn before you can activate them. That's why a card like Jar of Greed is unlimited and can be played at 3 copies per deck and sees absolutely 0 competitive play. While cards like Upstart Goblin and Into the Void, 2 cards with the same exact effect of just drawing 1 card, except they have downsides to drawing a card, are limited on the ban list and can only be played at 1 copy per deck. Being able to activate a card the turn you draw it is just infinitely more valuable than having to set it and wait a turn, as it allows all kinds of combo plays to happen, and that's why searching out spell cards is better than searching out the other 2 types of cards. Now, there are only a handful of cards that allow you to activate trap cards from your hand, and nearly all of them are limited to a certain archetype, or have all kinds of restrictions on how you're able to do it. Like Bubble Illusion, for example, requires you to control a Bubble Man on your side of the field and activate this specific card in order to just activate 1 trap card from your hand. Ebon High Magician requires you to detach an Exceeds material to activate 1 trap card from your hand, and this only works during your opponent's turn. Trap Tricks Atrax allows you to activate whole normal trap cards from your hand, and so on and so on. None of them have blanket activate anything from your hand though, because there was 2 cards kind of like that, MAKYURA the Destructor and Temple of the Kings. Both of these cards got banned for having an unlimited use of trap cards from your hand. Temple of the Kings allowed you to activate set trap cards the turn they were set, so it was not as strong as MAKYURA, but even that was so ridiculously overpowered that was banned for years and only came off the ban list because they changed its effect to only allow you to activate one trap card the turn it's set per turn, instead of an unlimited amount of them. And MAKYURA the Destructor allows you to activate any trap cards the turn this card is sent to the graveyard, which opens up so many different kinds of broken loops and combos that the card can never be unbanned, unless they gave it a one limit like they did with Temple of the Kings. Because with MAKYURA the Destructor, you can easily draw through every single card in your deck, or attack with an infinite amount of damage, or inflict 8,000 points of effect damage to your opponent in one turn easily, or just mill your opponent's entire deck, or activate your counter trap cards from your hand to negate things instantly, turning a card like Wiretap into a red reboot, for example. Being able to activate trap cards from your hand is so strong that trap cards who have the inherent effect that allow them to activate themselves from the hand are generally the only ones that see competitive play. Although this effect does kind of break the rules of the game a little bit, which is why it gets such a high spot on this list. And at number 1, we have the ability to instantly win. If there was a card that had the ability that just says you instantly win the duel when you use this, obviously everyone would play that. There is a card kind of like that, called EXODIA, but you need to have all 5 pieces of that card in your hand in order to activate that effect. And that's why EXODIA decks have seen play on and off pretty much ever since the inception of the game. And that's also why in other card games, they call strategies that allow you to win instantly EXODIA decks. YuGiOh actually does have quite a bit of cards that let you win instantly, but the one that's actually good is banned, and the other few that are also good, but not as broken as last turn, are limited to 1 copy to make them less consistent. And besides last turn, the EXODIA cards and Final Countdown, all of the other instant winner cards are pretty much terrible, and that's kind of the point. It's just like the skip your opponent's turn effect. They do have the effect in the game, it's just such an incredibly powerful effect that it's real easy to accidentally make it completely broken, like they did with last turn, and how you could instantly win if you just brought out a monster that prevented your opponent from special summoning. Or with things like Final Countdown, where if your entire deck was just nothing but cost-effective stall cards, you could essentially always win as long as you were able to survive for 10 turns. And EXODIA decks are why they limit draw cards so heavily. To an extent, if there's ever too much good draw power, there's always a chance that EXODIA decks will become top tier. So they generally give draw cards some kind of downside where they mess with the main deck, like Pot of Desires, banishing a 4th of your deck in order to draw cards, or how the Dangers randomly discard cards from your hand in order to draw cards. They're very scared of instant win effects and have to design a lot of things around the ones that already exist in the game, because EXODIA is too iconic to ban, and drawing cards is already a super powerful effect anyway, so no one really bats an eye when a new draw card is released. That doesn't work with EXODIA decks very well. And that's also why one of the strongest decks in the game, if you're able to use banned cards, is just one that lets you draw every single card in your deck, basically because it would let you draw into EXODIA easily. Alright, and that's the list. If you think I missed any other really strong effects that should have made it into this video over the ones I listed, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. And did you know, this channel has nearly 100 top 10s just like this video with the same level of quality? So, if you want something to put on in the background while playing games or something, I'd highly suggest you give this playlist a watch.